An overweight blonde consulted her doctor for advice. The doctor said she should run 10 miles a day for 30 days. This, he promised, would help her lose the 20 pounds she's been trying to get rid of. The blonde followed the doctor's advice, and after 30 days, she was pleased to find that she had indeed lost the pesky 20 pounds. She phoned the doctor and thanked him for the wonderful advice which produced such effective results. At the end of the conversation, however, she asked one last question. How do I get home, since I am now 300 miles away? As Josh strolled along the street, he saw his buddy Michael striding along anxiously with lots of bags in his hands. Hey Michael, is everything all right? You seem kind of jumpy? Michael set the bags on the ground and said, Yeah, I was just now at the state-of-the-art supermarket that they launched in the industrial part of the city. Oh, what's it like there? I heard it's remarkable. Kind of, Michael replied. Josh was amazed when Michael described the grocery store with enthusiasm, emphasizing the atmosphere of naturalness and genuineness. You could hear cows mooing and smell the barn in the milk section. In the egg aisle, chickens were cackling and the chicken coop was in the air, and it was even better in the vegetable section. You could literally hear the farmers and smell the fields. Wow, that sounds incredible, Josh exclaimed. Well, yes, in principle, said Michael with a grimace. But this is the last time I'm going there to buy toilet paper. A guy robs a bank and gets sentenced to life in prison. On his first day in prison, he sits down to lunch, terrified. No one's saying anything. You could cut the silence with a knife. Then suddenly, a biker-looking guy at his table stands up and shouts, 48! And the entire lunchroom bursts into uproarious laughter. The next day, a hard-looking guy with a shaved head stands up. 89! And everyone is rolling on the floor. Every day it's like this. Tense silence. Then someone shouts a number, and the laughter follows. One day, his curiosity overcomes his fear, and the guy turns to the old-timer to his right and asks, What's the deal with the numbers? The old-timer sizes him up, then replies, Well, you see, there's only one joke book in the prison library, and we've all been in here so long, we know every joke in that book by heart. So when someone calls out 65, we know it's the one about the nun with the pickle, and 97's the one with the priest, the rabbi, and the 3 Swedish girls. We all know the joke, so we don't need to say the whole thing. We just say the number, and everyone gets it. The next chance he gets, the guy makes his way to the prison library and finds the joke book. Sure enough, it's got numbers next to every joke. He flips through the worn pages until he finds a good one about a pickle farmer, his daughter, and his prize pig on their way to church. Chuckling to himself, he memorizes the number, 28. All he's gotta do is say the number. The next day, the familiar tense silence falls over the lunchroom, and he senses that this is his moment. He stands up, squeaking his chair, and 600 eyes turn to stare at the new guy. Ahem, he starts nervously. 28. Silence. Not a single laugh. After a few seconds, everyone starts eating again. He sits down, his face flushing beet red, and turns desperately to the old-timer. What did I do wrong? Did I pick the wrong one? Nah, that one's hilarious, says the old-timer. You just didn't tell it good. 3 women, a German, a Japanese, and an American hillbilly were sitting in a sauna. Suddenly, there was a beeping sound. The German pressed her forearm, and the beeping stopped. "That was my pager," she said. "I have a microchip implanted under the skin of my arm." A few minutes later, a phone rang. The Japanese woman lifted her palm to her ear. When she finished, she explained, "That was my mobile phone. I have a microchip in my hand." The hillbilly felt decidedly low-tech. Not to be outdone, she decided she had to do something impressive. She stepped out of the sauna and went to the bathroom. She returned with a piece of paper hanging from her behind. The others raised their eyebrows and stared at her. The hillbilly stared right back at them and said, "Well, will you look at that? I'm getting a fax." 2 young boys walked into a pharmacy one day, picked out a box of tampons and proceeded to the checkout counter. The pharmacist at the counter asked the older boy, "Son, how old are you?" "8, the boy replied. The man continued, "Do you know what these are used for?" The boy replied, "Not exactly, but they aren't for me. They're for him. He's my brother. He's 4. "Oh, really?" the pharmacist replied with a grin. "Yes," the boy said. "We saw on TV that if you use these, you would be able to swim, play tennis, and ride a bike. Right now, he can't do none of those." A young boy had just gotten his driving permit. He asked his father, who was a minister, if they could discuss his use of the car. His father said to him, "I'll make a deal with you. You bring your grades up, study your Bible a little, and get your hair cut, then we will talk about it." A month later, the boy came back and again asked his father if they could discuss his use of the car. His father said, "Son, I'm real proud of you. You have brought your grades up. You've studied your Bible diligently, but you didn't get hair cut." The young man waited a moment and replied, "You know, Dad, I've been thinking about that. You know Samson had long hair, and even Jesus had long hair." His father replied, "Yes, son," and they walked everywhere they went. Johann and Eric, 2 computer geeks with little social experience, ran into each other at the college entrance. "That's a great bike you have there. What made you get it?" Eric asked Johann. Johann got off the bike, removed his helmet and responded, "I didn't purchase it. Andrea gave it to me as a gift." "As a gift!" Eric exclaimed in surprise. "I always knew she was into you, but this is taking it to a whole new level." Johann smiled and told him, "Yesterday I was strolling in the park, and I saw Andrea on this bike. She came to me without saying anything, tossed the bike aside, then took off all her clothes and said, 'Take whatever you want.' Eric's jaw was hanging loose. 'So I took the bike?' Johann finished. Eric nodded in agreement and stated, 'Good decision. Her clothes wouldn't fit you.'" Albert, the village postman, is retiring after 50 years on the job. So he puts on his satchel and collects his last mailbag from the post office and sets out on his last round. He drops off a few letters at the local library. The librarian smiles and presents him with a leather-bound volume of the complete works of Charles Dickens. "Here you are, Albert. We know how much you like reading. Now you're retiring, You've got plenty of time for it now." Albert thanks him and continues on his route. Next, Albert knocks on the door of the village pub. The landlady fetches him a good bottle of 12-year-old single malt whiskey. "We've been keeping this for a special occasion. Pour yourself a large one on us and enjoy your retirement." Albert is touched by her gesture and moves on to the last address. Albert knocks on the door of Mrs. Smith. She answers the door in a negligee that leaves little to the imagination. "I've been expecting you, Albert." "You'd better come in." She leads him upstairs and proceeds to make mad, passionate love to him. Albert's head is still spinning, and as he gets dressed, Mrs. Smith slips a $10 note into his shirt pocket. Before he has chance to say anything, Mrs. Smith says, "We're not done yet," and leads him down to the kitchen. Mrs. Smith then cooks a fantastic breakfast of bacon, eggs, sausage, hash browns, toast. The full works. As he finishes eating and takes a swig of his coffee, Albert finally has chance to ask, "I must say, Mrs. Smith, everyone in the village has been very kind today, but you've been the kindest of all. Too kind, in fact. What on earth could have moved you to such a gesture?" Mrs. Smith thinks for a moment, leaning against the kitchen worktop. "Well, I was really racking my brains to think of something nice for you, so I asked my husband. He said, give him a tenner. But breakfast was my idea." And 70-year-old married a 20-year-old. A year after the wedding, the couple arrives at the delivery room. A male boy weighing 3.5 kilos was born, healthy and beautiful. The nurse asks the old man, "Yours?" "Yes," the old man replies proudly. "Congratulations," the nurse replies. "Well," says the old man, "the old engine still runs." 2 years later, the duo arrives at the delivery room again. A 3.5 kilo girl was born, healthy and beautiful. The nurse asks the old man, "Yours?" "Yes," the old man answers. "Well done," the nurse answers. "The engine still runs," said the old man. After 2 more years, they come to the delivery room again. A 3.5-year-old male son is born, healthy and beautiful. The nurse asks the old man, "Yours?" "Yes," the old man replies. "Congratulations," the nurse says. "That's really impressive." "Well," says the old man, "the engine is still running." "Well," says the nurse, "you may want to change the oil. The last one came out black." 3 women are about to be executed for crimes. One's a brunette, one's a redhead, and one's a blonde. 2 guards brings the brunette forward, and the executioner asks if she has any last requests. She says no, and the executioner shouts, "Ready? Aim!" Suddenly, the brunette yells, "Earthquake!" Everyone is startled and looks around. She manages to escape. The angry guards then bring the redhead forward, and the executioner asks if she has any last requests. She says no, and the executioner shouts, "Ready, aim!" The redhead then screams, "Tornado!" Yet again, everyone is startled and looks around. She too escapes execution. By this point, the blonde has figured out what the others did. The guards bring her forward, and the executioner asks if she has any last requests. She also says no, and the executioner shouts, "Ready? Aim!" The blonde shouts, "Fire!" A man was pulled over by a police officer. As the officer approached the vehicle, he noticed a large number of knives in the back seat. Looking at the driver, he asked, "Sir, do you have a good reason for needing all those large knives?" Smiling, the driver said, "Why, yes, I juggle them." Realizing the officer was giving him a skeptical look, the driver said, "Sir, with your permission, I'd be more than glad to give you a demonstration." Cautiously, the officer stepped back and said, "All right, but you'd better be telling the truth." A few seconds later, the man was on the side of the road, tossing the knives high into the air with ease as the police officer watched, mesmerized. Two old men happened to drive by, and both gazed in astonishment. The one looked at the other and said, "Sure, glad I gave up drinking. These sobriety tests are getting ridiculous." The police detectives were having trouble determining whether or not their suspects were guilty. They just couldn't get them to confess. After hearing word of a telepath who is able to determine if any person brought before him committed a crime, they decide to consult him. They bring the first suspect in, and instantly the man says, "This person has committed murder. He murdered a pizza man delivering to his house." Speechless, the police start to think this man is the real deal. "He has to be telling the truth," they say to each other. "We haven't told him anything about the case." They bring another suspect in, and instantly the man says, "This man is innocent and has committed no crimes. He was framed of burglary by his next-door neighbor, Bill Summers." The cops are dumbfounded. "How does he know? We haven't told him anything about the case." The cops are a bit skeptical and decide to make a little test. They bring in a beautiful woman they know to have not committed a felony. An officer enters the room with her, and instantly the man says, "This woman has committed theft." The officer, knowing this is a lie, tell the man, "We knew it. We brought her in to truly test your abilities, and clearly you're a fraud." They dismiss the woman. "I would catch up to her if I were you," says the man. "And why is that?" asks the officer. "Because she stole your wallet." A big bus stops at a roadside eatery. The passengers flood inside the eatery, and as they take their respective seats, the driver calls the manager aside and explains, "Look, sir, we're from the mental asylum down the road. I'm taking the inmates for a ride. When they're done eating, they will insist on paying with bottle caps, like they do inside. Please humor them and accept their payments. I'll clear the entire check at the end." So, as each passenger finishes eating and pays with bottle caps, the manager solemnly accepts them. After they were all seated in the bus, the driver approaches the manager, who presents the bill to him. The driver carefully scans the bill. "Excellent. I'm grateful for your cooperation. You don't know how hard it is to handle these people. Now, would you have change for a hubcap?" 3 youngsters were in the midst of a spirited debate to determine who had the swiftest dad. "My dad is the fastest," Anya exclaimed excitedly. "He's a builder and can chuck a brick off the 5th floor, race down the stairs, and catch it before it even hits the ground." "That's nothing," Brad boasted. "My dad is much faster. He's a professional archer and can target an arrow at a wolf's head, fire it, and then run and grab the creature before the arrow even lands." "Incredible!" exclaimed Tommy. "But I think my father is way faster." "What makes you say that?" asked Anya and Brad curiously. "My father has been working at the DMV for 20 years, Tommy answered. "He's expected to be off work at 5 p.m., but he's so speedy he's home by 1. Josh was excited. As his first official duty as a parish priest, fresh out of school, he got to officiate his first funeral for a homeless man with no friends or family. The young priest vowed to give him the most loving send-off, the love he probably missed in this life. The funeral was to be held at a new cemetery across town, and this man was the first to be laid to rest there. New to the area, Father Josh arrived late, but noticed a few workers gathering around the grave opening. The young and enthusiastic priest poured out his heart and soul as he gave his sermon and recited the prayers. His voice was so evocative and powerful that he brought the cemetery workers to tears. When the service was over, the priest thanked the workers for listening and walked to his car. As he opened the door, Josh heard one worker say to the other, "I've never seen anything like that before, and I've been putting in septic systems for over 20 years." Two mental patients, Jim and Neil, are sitting and playing checkers in the game room. Jim says, "Wow, don't ask what a terrible dream I had yesterday. I am in New York, get on the train on the way to Boston, fall asleep, and arrive in Chicago. Get on the train from Chicago to Boston, fall asleep again, and wake up in New York. It was back and forth like that all night long." Neil laughs and tells him, "I had an amazing dream yesterday, and I met a beautiful, famous woman." Jim gets excited, asking, "Who?" Neil answers him, "Beyoncé." "And what is she telling me? Can I come in to warm up?" "Well, so what did you say?" Jim asks. "I said to her, 'Why not? Let's have some fun.' She went in, took off her clothes, went into the shower, and came out with a towel to hug me on the couch." "Wow, what a dream," says Jim with a hint of envy. "Wait, that's not all," adds the other. "The second we sit down, another knock on the door. I open it, and who's standing in the entrance, wet from the rain?" "Well, who?" asks Jim enthusiastically. "Scarlett Johansson. She also wants to go in to warm up. She goes in, takes off her clothes, takes a shower, and comes to warm up with us on a sofa. And all night I'm thinking, what the heck am I going to do with two of them?" "What kind of friend are you?" complains Jim. "Couldn't you have called me? Isn't one beautiful, famous girl enough for you?" "You think I didn't try?" shouts Neil, suddenly upset. "I called you all night, but you? New York to Chicago, Chicago to New York, New York to Chicago." 3 technicians guys go into an interview for a job at the local telephone company. They were all 3 great candidates and very well qualified. The boss brings them into the office and says, "Okay, you 3 look the best on paper, but I gotta know if you have what it takes for the day-to-day work. So, I'm gonna give you 1 day to impress me. Set as many telephone poles as you can, and report back tomorrow." They all 3 go to work setting poles, and return the next day into the boss's office. The boss asks one by one how many they set. The first guy set 13. "Wow, 13, that is impressive," the boss tells him happily. The second guy set 9. "Well," said the boss, Not as good as the first guy, but still it is impressive. He turns to the third guy. How many did you set? The boss asks. 2. The man replies triumphantly, his blonde hair waving in the wind. 2. That's it. The manager was shocked. That's barely any. What were you doing all day? Well, I didn't want to have to be a snitch. But these other guys, they only put theirs halfway in the ground. A woman is walking through the park when she sees a very attractive man sitting on a park bench. He's reading a book and eating some fruit out of a Tupperware container. Slowly, the woman gathers the courage to go ask the man out. So she walks over and takes a seat next to him on the bench, turns to him and says, "Sorry to bother you. I know this may be a little forward, but I would love to grab coffee with you sometime." Flattered, the man responds, "Sure, but what makes you so certain you and I would get along so well?" "Well," the woman says, "a couple of things actually. Noticed you were wearing an Iron Maiden t-shirt. Iron Maiden are my favorite band of all time. When they went on their reunion tour in 1999, my parents took me to see them in Cleveland. I was 12 years old. It was the first concert I ever went to. I absolutely love Iron Maiden." The man can't believe it. "I saw them play Cleveland in '99, first concert I ever went to on my own. My best friend Jimmy Spitz and I told our parents we were sleeping at each other's houses, snuck out, took a bus into the city, and saw them play at the Plain Dealer Pavilion." Naturally, they're both shocked. "If that isn't weird enough," says the woman, "I noticed you're reading Mark Twain. I was a communications major in university, and I actually wrote my thesis on Mark Twain, how he used satire as a lens to comment on current events of the time, comparing him to satirical news sources of today. He's my favorite author." Now the man is really taken aback. "Get out of here! I was an English major in university. I specialized in 19th century American literature. This is like my 4th or 5th time reading Tom Sawyer. I absolutely love Mark Twain." They both can't believe it. This has got to be a match made in heaven. "Okay," the woman says. "Well, buckle up, because here's the icing on the cake. I noticed you're eating a prune." Prunes are my absolute favorite fruit. When I was a kid, my grandfather lived on a farm and grew them. They're my favorite fruit. I love prunes. You're eating a prune. This has got to be fate. What do you say?" The man puts down his fruit and responds, "It's a date." A retired army general moves into a new apartment after quitting service. Over the next few weeks, his new neighbors realized that on the weekends he would return to his apartment at 2 a.m. Very drunk, remove his left boot and slam it on the floor, remove his right boot and slam it on the floor even harder, and then go to sleep. Since the force of these thunderous slams was enough to wake up almost everyone around him, and this was a family complex no less, the neighbors decided to go to his house and confront him about this one morning. "Mr. General, sir, thank you for your service to our country, and we welcome you to our apartment complex." "Thank you." "Sir, we realize that serving the country for so long can really take a toll on someone, and we want you to enjoy your retirement." "Okay. But sir, can you please kindly not slam your boots down in the middle of the night once you return home on the weekends? It's waking us and our kids up." "Oh, I didn't know that. I am sorry for waking all of you up like that. How stupid of me. It won't happen again." "Thank you so much, sir." The next weekend, the general returns home, drunk, and sits on his bed. He removes his left boot and slams it on the floor. He removes his right boot and... Wait a minute. This is what they were talking about, isn't it? He says to himself in his drunken stupor. He gently places the right boot next to the left one and goes to bed. An hour or so later, the general wakes up to the sounds of the doorbell ringing continuously and heavy knocking on his door. He gets up, waddles over to the door, and opens it to find a group of his neighbours standing outside in their night clothes. "Sir, can you please just slam the other boot already so we can all get some sleep?"